The convoy hit the emergency bay at 11:47 p.m. 3 military vehicles, no sirens, just the hard screech of tires on wet pavement. They brought him in on a stretcher, a decorated Special Forces commander with 3 bullets buried so deep inside his chest that the attending physician went pale the moment he saw the scan. The operating surgeon was 45 minutes out. The soldier's blood pressure was collapsing in real time. Every credentialed doctor in that room was already calculating odds. And losing. Nobody looked at the nurse standing against the wall. Nobody asked her anything. That was their first mistake, and it nearly cost a man his life. Before this story goes any further, if you're watching this right now, I want you to hit follow, drop a like, and leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let's get into it. Tbon. The rain had been coming down since early afternoon, and by the time the night shift started at Harlow Regional Medical Center in Caldwell Point, the emergency department smelled like wet coats and antiseptic, and the particular kind of exhaustion that only sets in around hour 6 of a 12-hour stretch. Maya Voss clocked in at 7, same as always. She tied her hair back in the break room, checked the assignment board, and poured herself the last of the burnt coffee without complaint. She had learned a long time ago that complaining accomplished nothing in an ER. Not about the coffee, not about the assignments, not about the way certain attendings spoke to the nursing staff like they were furniture that occasionally asked questions. She was 34 years old. She had been working at Harlow Regional for 2 years. Before that, she had been at St. Ansgar Community in Deckerfield for 18 months. A smaller facility, less trauma volume, easier to disappear into the rhythm of the work. Before that, there had been other hospitals in other cities. And before all of them, there had been something she did not talk about, did not document, did not allow herself to think about on nights like this one, when the air pressure dropped and the scanner in her head started cataloging exit routes by reflex. She signed off on her first patient at 8:15, a construction worker with a fractured radius, not complicated, already splinted and waiting on discharge paperwork. She checked on a woman in Bay 4 with a hypertensive episode, adjusted the monitoring leads without being asked, noticed the attending had written the wrong dosage on the chart, and flagged it to the charge nurse instead of saying anything directly because that was how things worked here. You flagged. You documented. You did not challenge. Voss. Charge nurse Darlene Kwan appeared at her elbow, tablet in hand, reading glasses pushed up into her braids. I need you on Bay 7, GSW, incoming EMS, ETA 4 minutes. What's the wound profile? Abdomen, they think. Could be more. Radio's cutting in and out. Darlene was already moving. Dr. Ashworth is pulling from Bay 2. Make sure the room is ready. Maya moved. She had the room set before EMS came through the doors. Crash cart positioned, blood products ordered and pending, the overhead light angled correctly. Small things. The kind of things that took 10 seconds to do right and 10 minutes to undo if you skipped them. Dr. Ashworth arrived at the same time as the paramedics, and the organized chaos of a trauma intake compressed the room down to essential noise. The patient was a 19-year-old male, gang-adjacent neighborhood, single gunshot wound to the lower left quadrant. Not a complicated case, structurally. Maya prepped the IV access, drew the labs, and stepped back the moment Ashworth had what he needed. She filed the labs. She updated the chart. She was already moving toward the hall when Darlene caught her again. You're not going to believe what just rolled in, Darlene said, and her voice had a quality Maya hadn't heard from her before. Careful, almost hushed. What? Military, convoy. They're coming in through the ambulance bay right now. Maya stopped moving. It was not a conscious decision. Her body just stopped. A fraction of a second. A reset. What kind of military? She asked. The kind that doesn't explain itself, Darlene said. Get to Bay 1. Bay 1 at Harlow Regional was the largest trauma room they had. 4 beds separated by sliding curtain panels. A surgical light rig that could be repositioned in under 30 seconds, and enough wall-mounted equipment to handle simultaneous multi-system failures if the team knew what they were doing. It was used for mass casualty overflow, for the worst of the worst, for the cases nobody wanted to talk about in the morning. The convoy had come in fast and dark. No lights, no radio contact with dispatch. Just a phone call to the hospital administrator 30 minutes prior, and 2 Humvees flanking a black transport vehicle. Maya counted 8 men in the lobby from the hallway before she pushed through the bay doors. Military personnel, plainclothes security, and 2 individuals in civilian dress who moved with a precision that wasn't civilian at all. The patient came in on a rigid board, commander's insignia on the collar, torn open by someone in the field to get access to the wound site. Male, late 40s, physically large in the way that came from a career of deliberate conditioning rather than casual fitness. 3 entry wounds, left chest, right chest, and one that had punched through the lateral wall just below the arm. The field dressing on the rightmost wound had soaked through completely. Whoever had packed it had done a competent job, but they were out of time on that one. Dr. Harlan Pruitt was the trauma attending on for the night. He was 61, had trained at a level 1 center in the 90s, and carried himself with the particular confidence of a man who had handled 4 decades of the worst things that could happen to a human body. He was good. He was not good enough for this. And Maya saw that the moment she looked at the scan results loading on the bay monitor. The bullets had not gone where they were supposed to go. She had seen wounds like this before. Not in a hospital, not in any facility with climate control and proper lighting and attending physicians with board certifications framed on their office walls. She had seen them in conditions where the ground moved and the light came from burning vehicles, and you made decisions with your hands because there was no time to make them with your mind. She moved to the monitor without being asked. She was studying the scan while Pruitt was still getting a verbal handoff from the convoy medic, a young sergeant whose hands were shaking so slightly that you had to be watching for it. The entry patterns were wrong, not wrong in the sense of random, wrong in the sense of deliberate. The placement of all 3 wounds formed a configuration she recognized, not from textbooks, not from continuing education seminars, from operational briefings she was never supposed to retain. Voss? Pruitt's voice was flat and dismissive without any particular malice in it. He hadn't even looked at her. Get me another IV line and step back. She stepped back. She watched. The convoy medic was still giving the handoff. Blood pressure, respiratory rate, Glasgow coma scale, field interventions attempted. Maya listened to every word while she set the IV line, cataloging the information automatically, the way she had trained herself not to do anymore. The patient's name, according to the medic's verbal report, was Commander Darren Holt. The next 20 minutes were controlled and professional and quietly wrong. Pruitt ran the resuscitation the way he had run thousands of them. Blood products, pressure management, chest auscultation, the standard sequence. 2 of the other attendings cycled through the bay. Dr. Yolanda Ferris from cardiology, Dr. Nate Bromley, who had been pulled from a scheduled procedure upstairs. The room was full of credentials and experience and the sound of equipment functioning exactly as designed. Commander Holt's pressure kept dropping, not rapidly, not catastrophically, just steadily. A slow leak in a tire, the kind you didn't notice until you were already on the side of the road. Maya stood near the equipment wall and did not say anything. She watched Pruitt adjust his approach twice and could see from the monitor readings that both adjustments were logical responses to the data he was working with. Both of them were wrong. She was doing math she wasn't supposed to be doing. The bullet placement, the wound trajectories visible on the scan, the fact that the field dressing on the right lateral wound had soaked through in a pattern inconsistent with a simple soft tissue bleed. It was tamponating against something, and that something was not where Pruitt thought it was, because the bullet had deflected off the lower edge of the 4th rib before settling, which meant the internal trajectory was angled 15 degrees differently than the external entry point suggested. She had seen a deflection like that once. Twice, actually. Both times in circumstances she was not going to describe to anyone in this room. Bromley checked the scan on the monitor and said, "I'm not seeing a clear pneumothorax." "It's not a pneumo," Maya said. Silence. The word had come out of her before she had decided to say it. Both attending turned to look at her, not with anger exactly, but with the particular expression that people in authority reserve for the moment a subordinate speaks without being addressed. Pruitt's expression was flat. Bromley looked almost curious. "The deflection," she said, because she had already said something and stopping now would be worse than continuing. "On the right lateral wound, the bullet clipped the 4th rib on entry. That changes the internal trajectory by at least 10 to 15 degrees. The terminal position isn't where the initial projection suggests. It's sitting against the pericardial border, not lateral to it. Pruitt looked at her for a long second. "You're reading a trauma scan now," he said. "I'm reading what's on the screen. You're a floor nurse." "I'm an ER nurse," she said. "There's a difference." "Not in this room there isn't." Pruitt turned back to the patient. "Someone get me cardiothoracic on the phone. And Voss, I need you on documentation, not commentary." She moved to the documentation station. She documented. She watched Commander Holt's blood pressure drop another 4 points. Stunt. The cardiothoracic surgeon on call was Dr. Francesca Odom. Maya knew her by reputation. Good hands, methodical thinker, the kind of surgeon who did excellent work on predictable cases and occasionally struggled when the case stopped behaving the way the textbook said it should. Odom arrived in the bay 12 minutes after the call and spent 3 minutes reviewing the scan before confirming what Pruitt had already concluded. Standard trajectory assessment, standard intervention plan. Maya said nothing. She updated the chart. She drew the next set of labs. She watched the monitor. Holt's pressure, 74/48. She pulled up the scan on the secondary monitor at the documentation station, the one that the attending physicians had stopped actively watching because they were focused on the patient directly. She tilted the imaging angle on the viewer, something the system allowed, though most people in the ER never used the function because they weren't thinking about three-dimensional trajectory mapping when they were managing a trauma. There it was. The bullet's terminal position was sitting against the inferior margin of the pericardium at an angle that was generating intermittent compression. Not enough to show on a standard echocardiogram reading without the right adjustment. Not enough to be obvious. Enough to kill a man in the next 20 minutes if nobody addressed it. She stood at the station for 6 seconds. 6 seconds is a long time when you are standing still and making a decision about how much of yourself you are willing to reveal. Then she walked to the head of the bed. "Dr. Odom," her voice was level. "The pericardium, inferior margin, left of midline. The bullet is generating intermittent tamponade. It's not showing on the standard echo reading because the compression is positional. It's only occurring at the angle his body is currently oriented." Odom looked at her with the particular expression of someone who has just been told something unexpected by a person they did not expect to say it. "And you know this how?" Odom asked. "Tilt the imaging plane 12 degrees on the secondary monitor," Maya said. "Look at the inferior margin." Nobody moved for 2 seconds. Then Bromley, from across the room, tilted the imaging plane on the secondary monitor. The room went quiet. The compression was visible, intermittent, positional, exactly where Maya had said it was. Pruitt looked at the monitor. He looked at Maya. He looked at the monitor again. "How did you know to look there?" he asked. "I've seen this before," she said. "In an ER?" She didn't answer that. What happened next was not smooth. It was not graceful. It was 4 physicians recalibrating in real time while a man's blood pressure continued its slow decline, and the revision to the intervention plan required Odom to make a judgment call that she visibly did not enjoy making because it meant acknowledging that her initial read had been incomplete. To her credit, she made it. Odom called for the revised setup without wasting time on ego, and Maya was already 2 steps ahead of the order. The instruments Odom needed were in her hands before the request was complete. Odom noticed. She didn't say anything. She took the instruments and went to work. The procedure was technically demanding. Odom was good enough to execute it. Maya stood at the instrument table and said nothing, but she was watching the monitor the entire time, tracking the pressure readings. And when Odom hesitated at a particular moment in the approach, a fraction of a second, a micro-hesitation that only someone watching for it would catch, Maya said quietly, almost under her breath, 2 millimeters left. Odom shifted left 2 millimeters without asking why. The compression released. Holt's blood pressure stabilized in under 90 seconds. The numbers climbed, not fast, not dramatic, just steady and purposeful. The monitor stopped alarming. The room let out a collective breath that nobody would have admitted to holding. Pruitt stared at the monitor. Then he stared at Maya. She was already moving back to the documentation station. By 1 a.m., Holt was stable enough for transfer to the surgical ICU. The military personnel in the hall had been quiet throughout. No interference, no demands. But one of them, a woman in civilian dress who had stood near the bay door the entire time, had been watching Maya specifically. Not the doctors, not the monitors. Maya. Maya had noticed her in the first 10 minutes and had not looked directly at her since. The transport team arrived for Holt. Odom was signing the transfer documentation. Pruitt had gone to another bay. The room was decompressing the way trauma rooms always did after the immediate crisis passed. People moving slower, voices dropping, the particular stillness of aftermath. The woman in civilian dress stepped through the bay door. She was perhaps 40, with the kind of face that gave nothing away by default. Dark hair, no jewelry, a lanyard with an ID badge that Maya could read from 6 feet away if she had allowed herself to look at it, which she did not. "Ms. Voss," the woman said. Maya did not look up from the documentation. "I'm finishing the chart," she said. "I understand. I can wait." "I don't know who you are." "My name is Agent Renata Cross," the woman said. "I'm with the Defense Intelligence Agency." Maya's hands did not stop moving on the keyboard. This was a skill. A very specific, very deliberately cultivated skill. Keeping your hands moving when everything in your body wanted to go still. "I'm on shift until 7, Maya said. "I know," Cross said. "But I think we both know that what happened in this room tonight is going to require a conversation." A man came in with chest wounds. The medical team stabilized him. That's what happened in this room. "That's one version," Cross said. Maya saved the chart. She turned around. She looked at Renata Cross directly for the first time. "I have 4 other patients to check on," Maya said. "Of course." Cross produced a card from her jacket and set it on the equipment tray beside the monitor. "When you're ready." She walked out. Maya looked at the card for a moment. Then she looked at the bay door. Then she looked at the monitor, where Holt's last recorded pressure, 118/76, still sat on the screen. Stable. Alive. She picked up the card. She put it in her scrubs pocket. She walked out of the bay and down the hall to check on her next patient, and she did not allow herself to think about what Renata Cross already knew, or what she had been sent here to confirm, or what it meant that a DIA agent had been embedded in the military convoy before the convoy ever arrived at the hospital. Because thinking about that would require thinking about other things. Things she had spent 6 years doing her level best to bury. She pushed through the door to Bay 4 and introduced herself to the woman with the elevated blood pressure, and she smiled, and she asked the right questions, and she was, to everyone watching, exactly what she appeared to be. A nurse, doing her job. Nothing more. Behind her, in the corridor, 2 of the military personnel from the convoy were in quiet, urgent conversation with the hospital administrator. One of them was holding a tablet showing security footage from the past hour. The footage was focused on Bay 1, on Maya. And they were not the only ones who had been watching. The 2 men in the corridor were still talking when Maya came back from Bay 4 20 minutes later, but they had moved, positioned now near the nursing station, which was not where they had been before, which meant they had repositioned deliberately, which meant they wanted to be seen. She clocked that and kept walking. The rest of the shift passed the way shifts passed when you were actively trying to appear unaware of something. She changed a dressing in Bay 6. She verified medication reconciliation for a 60-year-old woman with a respiratory infection who kept insisting she felt fine and could go home, which she could not. She updated 3 charts. She drank half a cup of water she didn't taste. Around 2:30 a.m., the ER hit a brief lull, the particular quiet that came in the dead hours between the last bar fight injuries and the first early morning cardiac events, and she sat at the nursing station and stared at the monitor in front of her without reading anything on it. Darlene slid into the chair beside her, set a coffee down without comment. "You doing okay?" Darlene asked. "Fine." "Because the way Odom looked at you when she walked out of Bay 1 was nothing," Maya said. "I made an observation. It was useful. That's the end of it." Darlene was quiet for a moment. She had a quality that most charge nurses eventually developed, the ability to sit with a silence without trying to fill it. "Those people in the hall," she said. The ones who came with the convoy. What about them? Two of them asked the administrator for your personnel file. Maya picked up the coffee. She took a sip. It was bad. Old, over-extracted, the kind of coffee that made you understand why people left night shifts as soon as they had the seniority to avoid them. Did he give it to them? She asked. He's making calls, Darlene said. Hospital legal, he said. But Maya, she stopped, started again. Is there something you want to tell me? Maya set the cup down. She looked at Darlene, who had been kind to her for 2 years without asking for anything in return, who had backed her on schedule conflicts and covered for her once when she'd been sick and hadn't said a word about it since. No, Maya said, there isn't. Darlene nodded slowly. She didn't look convinced. She also didn't push. At 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the end of her shift, Maya was stopped in the hallway outside the staff locker room by Dr. Harlan Pruitt. He had his coat on, which meant he was also ending his shift. He looked like a man who had spent the last several hours deciding whether or not to have a conversation and had landed on yes with some reluctance. Voss, he said. She stopped. Dr. Pruitt. He didn't say anything immediately. This was unusual. Pruitt was not a man who used silence as a communication tool. He was direct, sometimes bluntly so, and the pause between them felt effortful on his end. The pericardial compression, he said finally, the way you identified it. I explained how. You said you'd seen it before, in those specific words. He was watching her with the careful attention of someone assembling a picture from pieces he wasn't sure fit together. I've been doing trauma medicine for 38 years. I've seen maybe 4 cases in my career where a bullet deflection produced that specific pattern. All 4 of them were military personnel. All 4 of them were brought in from circumstances that didn't get fully explained to the receiving hospital. Maya held his gaze. The outcome was good, she said. Commander Holt is stable. Yes. Pruitt's jaw moved slightly. Thanks to something you did that you're not going to explain to me. I made an observation. I communicated it. Dr. Odom made the clinical decision. That's very accurate, he said, and entirely not what I'm talking about. They stood there for a moment. In the background, the day shift was starting to filter in. The sound of the department changing character, voices going from low and tired to low and brisk. I should finish my checkout, Maya said. There are people waiting to speak with you, Pruitt said. The woman from last night, Cross, and 2 others I haven't seen before. They're in the administrative conference room. Maya absorbed this. I'll go change first, she said. Pruitt stepped aside. Then, as she moved past him, he said, quietly, almost to himself, whatever it is you came from, Voss, whatever it is you're trying to stay away from. He stopped. Holt's alive. That means something. She didn't answer. She kept walking. Mum. The administrative conference room at Harlow Regional was on the 3rd floor, past the risk management offices and the small HR suite, and a waiting area where family members sat in plastic chairs and learned things they hadn't expected to learn that day. Maya had been in the room twice before, once for her onboarding, once for a performance review that had been entirely unremarkable. This time, there were 4 people in it. Renata Cross sat at the head of the table, which told Maya something about organizational hierarchy without requiring anyone to explain it. Beside her was a man Maya estimated to be in his early 50s, compact, with the kind of posture that didn't come from good habits and came instead from long-term conditioning. The other 2 were younger, one in civilian dress, who was clearly military by the way he was sitting, and one woman in a suit who had the quiet, economical body language of someone trained to observe and not be observed. Maya sat down across from Cross. She did not take off her jacket. I have to be somewhere at 9, Maya said. This won't take long, Cross said. Or it might take considerably longer. That depends on how the next 10 minutes go. Then let's start. Cross opened a folder on the table. She did not push it toward Maya. She simply opened it and left it where it was, which was a technique, forcing Maya to lean forward to read it, or not lean forward, either choice communicating something. Maya did not lean forward. Your name at Harlow Regional is Maya Voss, Cross said. Massachusetts nursing license, 7 years. Before that, St. Ansgar Community in Deckerfield, RN, 18 months. Before that, Riverside General in Pelham, 18 months. Before that, she paused. The record gets complicated. Nursing history isn't complicated, Maya said. It's sequential employment. It is, Cross agreed. Right up until 4 years of it don't exist. She looked up from the folder. You have a gap, Ms. Voss. 38 months. No employment record, no tax filings, no lease agreements, no utility accounts, no credit activity. She paused. For most people, that kind of gap suggests something went wrong. Illness, incarceration, displacement. Another pause. For a very small number of people, it suggests the opposite. The room was quiet. Maya looked at Cross. What do you want? She said. I want to understand what happened in Bay 1 last night. I explained the imaging angle to Dr. Odom. She made the call. Before that, Cross said, the initial read. You identified a 3-bullet wound pattern in under 2 minutes of observation and characterized it as deliberate placement, not random gunfire. Deliberate. That's what the scan showed. No, Cross said evenly. That's what the scan showed to someone who knew what deliberate placement looked like, someone with a specific frame of reference for that pattern. She leaned forward slightly. Commander Holt was the target of an assassination attempt, not a robbery, not a street crime. A professional coordinated hit using rounds specifically selected for the wound profile they would create. Maximum internal damage, minimum external evidence, maximum difficulty in surgical intervention. She stopped. The shooter knew exactly what they were doing, and so did you when you looked at those scans. Maya said nothing. We've been looking for the shooter for 11 hours, Cross continued. We've also been running parallel inquiries into several other matters connected to Holt's work before last night. What happened in that ER, and specifically what you identified, has given us a thread we didn't have before. She held Maya's gaze. I need to know where that knowledge comes from. I've been a nurse for a long time, Maya said. You have, Cross said, and nurses with your level of experience are excellent clinicians. They are not capable of identifying deliberate wound placement patterns on trauma scans within 90 seconds, unless they have a background that goes beyond nursing. She closed the folder. So I'm going to ask you directly, and I'm going to ask you once. The room felt smaller than it was. What was your designation before you were Maya Voss? The silence lasted 7 seconds. Maya counted them. She had a protocol for moments like this one. She had built it carefully, over time, the way you built anything you intended to rely on, piece by piece, tested under low-stakes conditions, stress-tested under higher ones. The protocol was simple. Say nothing that was confirmable. Say nothing that opened a door you couldn't close. Maintain the identity completely and without apparent effort, because apparent effort was its own kind of confession. The problem with the protocol was that it had been built for a different kind of inquiry. Background checks, routine employment verification, the occasional conversation with a curious colleague who had noticed something slightly off and couldn't articulate what. It had not been built for a DIA agent sitting across a conference table with a folder that contained 38 months of Maya Voss's life that weren't there. I think, Maya said, that if you had what you needed to compel this conversation, you wouldn't be asking. Cross looked at her. That's a fair observation. Which means you have suspicion, Maya said. You have inference. You have what happened in Bay 1 last night, which you are interpreting through a particular lens. She kept her voice level. You don't have documentation, because if you did, you wouldn't need me to confirm it. Also fair, Cross said. She didn't look rattled. She didn't look like a woman who rattled easily. But here's the thing about documentation, Ms. Voss. It works in both directions. She opened the folder again, this time pushing it across the table. This arrived this morning, 40 minutes ago. Maya looked at the folder. Inside was a single sheet, not a report, not a file printout. A photograph printed on standard paper, slightly degraded in quality from the enlargement process. It was a photograph of Maya, not the Maya who worked night shifts at Harlow Regional and drank burnt coffee and flagged medication errors on other people's charts. A different Maya. Younger by 6 or 7 years, in gear that was not nursing scrubs, in an environment that was not a hospital. The image was grainy, clearly pulled from a larger source, the way images got when they were extracted from video footage. Her hair was different. Her expression was different. Everything about the way she was standing was different. She had never seen this photograph before. "Where did this come from?" she said. The question came out before she could stop it, which was its own kind of answer. "That," Cross said quietly, "is what I'm trying to figure out." The man beside Cross spoke for the first time. He had a voice that matched his posture, measured, not loud, the kind of voice you had to pay attention to rather than the kind that demanded it. "My name is Director Callum Bryce," he said. "I oversee a specific operational division within the DIA. I'm not going to detail what that division does because you already know, and because we're on a timeline that doesn't allow for extended preamble." He looked at her directly. Commander Holt was conducting an internal investigation before he was shot. Not a field operation, an investigation into a network operating partially inside the defense contractor system, procurement fraud, classified technology transfer, and at least 2 sanctioned operations that were quietly redirected for private profit. He paused. He was 11 days from completing a formal evidence package. Someone inside found out about the investigation and moved to stop it. "You think there's an inside source," Maya said. "We know there's an inside source," Bryce said. "We've known for 6 weeks. What we don't know is who." He leaned forward slightly. "Holt is alive because of what happened in that room last night. That matters to us. But it also means the people who tried to kill him know he's alive. They will try again." "Then get him somewhere secure." "He is somewhere secure," Bryce said. "The problem is that the wound complex he sustained requires ongoing specialized intervention. There are 3 thoracic surgeons in this region with the clearance level and the profile for this kind of operation, and all 3 of them were vetted 6 months ago against a threat profile that has now changed significantly." He held her gaze. "We need someone we can trust. Someone whose clearance history, competence profile, and current position all align with what Holt needs in the next 72 hours. Maya looked at him. "I'm a nurse," she said. "You are," he said. "You're also the only person in this building who looked at that scan last night and saw what was actually there." She looked back at the photograph on the table, the grainy image of herself in a life she had walked out of. She thought about the card in her scrub's pocket. She thought about Pruitt in the hallway. She thought about Darlene not pushing, which was the kindest thing anyone had done for her in months. "Who else has this photograph?" she asked. Cross and Bryce exchanged a look that lasted half a second. "That's what concerns us," Cross said. Maya left the conference room at 8:22 a.m. and drove home. She lived in a second-floor apartment on the east side of Caldwell Point, a 12-minute drive from the hospital, in a building where the hallway lights on the second floor had been flickering for 6 months and nobody had fixed them. She had rented the apartment because it had 2 exits, a front door and a fire escape accessible from the kitchen window, and because the landlord did not ask questions beyond proof of income, which Maya had in the form of a clean employment record and a bank account that had existed for exactly as long as Maya Voss had existed. She changed out of her scrubs. She made coffee that was better than the hospital's, which was not a high bar. She sat at the kitchen table and looked at the far wall and let herself think about things she hadn't thought about in 6 years. Her name had not always been Maya Voss. She had been Maya Reyes for the first 28 years of her life, and for 4 of those years she had held a designation within a special operations support unit that she was not going to name even in her own thoughts, because naming things made them real in a way that was inconvenient. She had been embedded with field teams in 3 operational theaters. She had done things that were necessary and legal and authorized, and that she had still needed to stop doing when a mission in her final deployment went wrong in ways that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with the people giving orders. She had left quietly, the kind of quiet that required institutional cooperation, which she had received in exchange for institutional silence, which she had maintained for 6 years without difficulty. Until last night. Until a man arrived with 3 bullets in a configuration she recognized, and her hands had already known what to do before her brain caught up, and there had been a woman with a DIA badge watching her from the doorway. She drank her coffee. She thought about Bryce's timeline. 72 hours. She thought about the photograph. The photograph was the problem. Not Cross's questions, not Bryce's operational explanation, not the personnel file request. The photograph was something that should not exist. She did not know when it had been taken. She did not know who had taken it or where it had come from or who else had a copy. And Bryce and Cross had looked at each other when she'd asked who else had it, which meant the answer was something they either didn't know or didn't want to say. Both options were bad. She was on her second cup of coffee when her phone buzzed. Not the cell phone on the table, the other one, the prepaid, the one in the drawer underneath the kitchen towels that she checked every 3 months and had never received a message on. She looked at the drawer. She crossed the kitchen and opened it. One message. No sender identification. 5 words. They found the second shooter. Her coffee went cold on the table. She was back at Harlow Regional by 10 a.m., not because Bryce had asked her to come back. She hadn't agreed to anything in that conference room. She had asked questions, absorbed information, and left without committing to a single word. She came back because the message on the prepaid phone meant that someone else knew her old number, and whoever that was had information about last night, and that made her presence at the hospital relevant in a way that her absence would not be. Also, she told herself, Holt was still here, still in the surgical ICU, still recovering from a wound complex that she understood better than anyone else in the building. She told herself that was the reason. She was mostly convinced. Darlene was at the nursing station when Maya came in through the side entrance. "You're not on shift," Darlene said. "I left my bag," Maya said. Darlene looked at her. Maya was not carrying a bag. Darlene did not point this out. "Dr. Odom's been asking about you," Darlene said. "And that woman from this morning, Cross, she's still in the building." "I know." "And there's been a development." Darlene lowered her voice, which she almost never did at the nursing station, because she believed strongly that unnecessary secrecy in a medical environment created confusion, and confusion killed people. The fact that she was lowering her voice now meant something. "Someone tried to access the ICU about an hour ago, through the service corridor. Security intercepted them." Maya went still. "Patient harm?" "No, they didn't get close, but..." Darlene hesitated. "Whoever it was had a hospital ID badge, Maya. Not a visitor pass, a staff ID. It scanned." "Whose ID?" "That's the thing," Darlene said. "It was active and valid. But the person it belonged to has been on approved leave for 3 weeks. Nobody can reach them." Maya processed this. A borrowed badge? A cloned badge? Or a badge that had been issued to someone who had been placed here deliberately, which required a lead time of weeks and a level of access to hospital administrative systems that was not casual. "Where is security holding the person they intercepted?" she asked. "They're not," Darlene said. "That's the other thing." She looked at Maya with an expression that was not quite fear, but was something adjacent to it. "By the time the second officer arrived, they were gone. Just gone." Left the badge on the floor and walked out through the loading dock. Maya looked toward the far end of the corridor, toward the elevator bank that led to the surgical ICU. "Has anyone told Cross?" she said. "Bryce's team is up there now," Darlene said. 3 of them. But Maya..." She stopped. "The badge they left behind, the one on the floor." "What about it?" Darlene looked at her for a long moment, in the way of someone who has been deciding all morning whether to say a specific thing. "It had your photo on it," she said. The corridor noise continued around them. The PA system, a distant monitor alarm, the ordinary sounds of a hospital morning. Maya stood in the middle of it and felt the perimeter of her carefully constructed life contract by several inches in every direction at once. Someone had built a staff ID with her face on it, with a name she did not recognize, with valid access credentials for a hospital she had worked in for 2 years, the photograph from the conference room, the prepaid message. And now this. 3 things. 3 things that pointed in the same direction, which was the direction of someone who had known where she was for longer than last night. Someone who had been watching and building and waiting. Not for Commander Holt to arrive at Harlow Regional, but for Maya specifically. Which meant the convoy hadn't been random. Which meant Holt hadn't just been brought here because it was the closest trauma center. Which meant someone had known she would be here, and had sent the commander to her, and had also sent the person with the clone badge. And those 2 facts could not both be true without one of them being a trap. She just didn't know yet which one. The elevator to the surgical ICU was 30 feet away. Maya walked toward it without telling Darlene where she was going, because Darlene already knew, and because saying it out loud would have required Maya to explain a decision she hadn't fully made yet. She pressed the call button. The doors opened. She stepped in and rode up to the fourth floor with her hands loose at her sides and her breathing deliberate and her mind moving through the available information the way it used to move through terrain maps. Not looking for comfort, looking for the shape of the problem. Someone had built a staff credential with her photograph. The construction of a valid hospital ID with working access credentials was not a casual undertaking. It required a source image, which could have come from the hospital's own HR database or from external surveillance. It required technical access to the credential system or a contact inside it. It required time, not weeks necessarily, but days at minimum, and the planning that preceded the execution would have started earlier still. This was not something assembled in response to last night. This had been built before last night, which meant before Holt arrived, which meant before anyone outside the convoy could have known he was coming here, unless someone inside the convoy had made the call. The elevator opened on 4. 2 of Bryce's people were in the hallway, the younger man from the conference room and someone new, a woman in a navy jacket who clocked Maya's approach and shifted her weight very slightly, the way people did when they were deciding whether to intercept. Maya held up her hospital ID badge. "I'm on staff," she said. "I was in the OR last night." The woman looked at her for a moment, then she stepped aside. The surgical ICU at Harlow Regional had 8 bays separated by glass partitions with privacy curtains that could be drawn from inside. Holt was in Bay 3. She could see the military-adjacent security posture of the man sitting outside the glass, the way his chair was angled so his back was never fully to the room. Professional. Not hospital standard professional. The other kind. Dr. Francesca Odom was at the nursing station inside the ICU, reviewing a monitor readout, her back partially to the door. She turned when Maya came in. The expression on her face was complicated. Odom was a precise woman, surgical in her communication as much as her technique, spare with words, sparer with approval. She did not do complicated expressions easily, and the one she was wearing now looked like it had cost her something. "You came back," Odom said. "I want to check the wound status," Maya said. "You're not his nurse." "I know the wound profile better than anyone else on this floor," Maya said. "If that bothers you, I'll leave." Odom looked at her for a moment that stretched just long enough to communicate something. Then she turned back to the monitor. "Drainage output increased at 6 this morning," Odom said. "I adjusted the chest tube position at 740. It's stabilized, but the inferior margin is still showing trace fluid accumulation on imaging." She paused. "The bullet fragment. The one you identified. It shifted overnight. Less than a millimeter, but it shifted." Maya moved to the monitor. She looked at the imaging comparison. Last night's scan next to this morning's. The fragment had not shifted randomly. It had moved in a direction consistent with normal tissue inflammation and positional change. Not dangerous yet. Potentially dangerous within the next 12 to 18 hours if the trajectory continued. "He needs to stay on his left side," Maya said. "Not alternating. Left side, continuous, for at least the next 6 hours. It limits the migration vector." Odom was quiet for a second. "That's going to be uncomfortable for him." "Yes," Maya said. Another pause. "You're right," Odom said in the tone of someone who had decided the statement cost less than it appeared to. She made the notation without further commentary. Maya looked through the glass partition at Holt in Bay 3. He was awake. She could see it in the way his eyes were tracking the ceiling. Not the unfocused gaze of heavy sedation, but the careful, deliberate attention of someone who was in significant pain and managing it by being very still and very aware of everything around him. He turned his head toward the glass. He looked at her. She looked back. She went in. She told herself she was checking the IV line, which needed to be checked. The distal port had a small amount of infiltration visible at the insertion site, and she recannulated it efficiently while Holt watched her with the same careful attention he'd been directing at the ceiling. "You were in the OR," he said. His voice was rough, pulled down by anesthesia residue and pain medication, but his articulation was clear. "Yes," she said. "I was conscious for part of it," he said. "Not clearly, but I heard you." He stopped to manage a breath. She could see the effort it cost him, the fractional tightening around his eyes. You told Odom 2 millimeters left. I did. That's not a nursing call, he said. It was last night, she said. He looked at her. He had the eyes of someone who had spent a long time in environments where reading people accurately was not a professional skill but a survival one. What's your name? He asked. Maya Voss. I'm on the ER nursing staff. That's not what I asked, he said. She secured the IV line and checked the dressing on the lateral wound. Still intact, drainage within expected parameters for this stage. She noted it on the chart without answering him. There was a breach attempt on this floor about an hour ago, she said instead. Someone with a cloned staff ID. They didn't get to you, but they were inside the building. Something moved through his expression, not surprise, something closer to confirmation. How many people know you're here? She asked. The convoy manifest is classified, he said. That didn't answer my question. He held her gaze. Fewer than 6 hours ago. Someone knew the convoy route before last night, she said. The wound placement was deliberate. Specific pattern, specific ammunition. You know what that means operationally. It means they had eyes on me for days before the hit, he said. And they have eyes on this building now, she said. The breach attempt wasn't to finish the job. It was reconnaissance. They wanted to confirm your location and your status. Holt was quiet for a moment. The monitor above him tracked his heart rate, steady but elevated. The biology of a man in pain doing the work of staying calm. Bryce is here, he said. It wasn't a question. He's been here since this morning, she said. Has he told you what I was carrying? He told me you were 11 days from completing an evidence package, she said. Internal investigation, procurement fraud, technology transfer, redirected operations. He told you that much, Holt said. It was not quite a statement and not quite a question. He seemed to be recalibrating something. He told me enough to explain why someone wants you dead, Maya said. He didn't tell me everything. No, Holt said. He wouldn't have. He shifted his weight very slightly and she saw the breath catch. The left side adjustment was going to be hard for him and he hadn't been informed of it yet. The package isn't just numbers and contracts. It's names. 16 names specifically. 11 of them are defense contractors. The other 5 are active duty. He paused. 3 of the 5 have high-level access to operational deployment schedules. Meaning they could track your movements, Maya said. Meaning they've been tracking a lot more than my movements, he said. For longer than anyone knew. I was just the one close enough to the proof to be a problem. She absorbed this. The room was very quiet except for the monitors. The evidence package, she said. Where is it? Not on me, he said. Wasn't on me last night either. Whoever searched the convoy scene before your security team arrived found a decoy. He looked at her steadily. The real package is somewhere that won't be found unless I tell someone where it is. Then tell Bryce. I'm going to, Holt said. But Bryce has a problem. What problem? One of his people, Holt said. I don't know which one. But the operational security on my movements was tight. 4 people maximum had the full picture. The breach happened anyway. He looked at her with the careful, precise attention of a man who had spent a career learning to trust sparingly. I need someone outside that circle. Someone who has a reason to be in this building, access to this room, and a background that can be verified through channels that aren't connected to the network I'm investigating. Maya looked at him. You don't know my background, she said. Cross showed me the photo this morning, he said, before you came back. She was quiet. I know you left, he said. I know why people leave. I'm not asking you to go back to whatever you walked away from. He paused. I'm asking you to help me finish something that matters. You're asking a lot, she said, for a man who's been awake for 4 hours. I know, he said, but you came back, Ms. Voss. You didn't have to. She looked at him for a moment, then she looked at the monitor. Get some rest, she said. I need to talk to Bryce. Bryce was in the family consultation room across from the ICU, which had been repurposed as a temporary operations space, a laptop, an encrypted communications unit, and the young military-adjacent man from the conference room who appeared to be managing both simultaneously. Cross was on the phone in the corner. The woman in the navy jacket was outside the door. Maya closed the door behind her. Holt told me about the 5 names, she said. Bryce looked up from the laptop. He was not visibly surprised, which meant he had either expected Holt to talk to her or had arranged for it. How much did he tell you? Bryce asked. Enough, she said. He also told me he thinks one of your people has a problem. This landed differently. The young man at the laptop looked up. Cross lowered her phone slightly. He said that, Bryce said. He didn't name anyone, Maya said. He said the operational security was too tight for a breach to happen through outside intelligence alone. Bryce closed the laptop. He sat back. He had the look of a man who had been carrying a specific weight for long enough that the muscles had adapted to it. I've been running that probability for 6 weeks, he said. And I have 4 viable candidates and no way to narrow it without tipping my hand to all of them, he said, because the moment one of them knows I'm looking, the package disappears and Holt becomes disposable whether he's stable or not. So you need him to be able to hand it off, Maya said. I need him to be alive and functional long enough to testify before a closed Senate oversight panel, Bryce said. 12 days from now, in a location that won't be confirmed until 48 hours prior. He looked at her. And I need his medical management to be handled by someone who isn't on a list that any of my 4 candidates can access. She looked at him. You're not asking me to be a nurse, she said. I'm asking you to be exactly a nurse, Bryce said. Visibly, documentably, with every record showing standard post-surgical recovery management. He held her gaze. And to be the other thing, simultaneously, because the reality is that Holt's wound complex is unusual enough that the standard of care requires someone who understands what we're actually dealing with. You had this planned before last night, Maya said. The slight pause before his answer was fraction of a second small. We identified you 3 months ago, he said. We've been watching for the right operational context. The room was quiet. She thought about the prepaid phone. The 5 words. They found the second shooter. Someone had sent that before she'd come back to the hospital. Someone who knew her number and knew what was happening and wanted her to come back. The message I received this morning, she said. On a line that shouldn't exist anymore. Did it come from you? Bryce's expression did not change. No, he said. Cross? No, Cross said from the corner. She had fully lowered the phone now. Then who knew that number? Maya said. Nobody answered. The answer arrived in a way that answers sometimes did in bad situations, not as information delivered, but as a physical event that made the question irrelevant. The fire alarm went off at 10:47 a.m. Not the full building alarm. The ICU specific suppression system, triggered by a smoke sensor on the 4th floor's east corridor, which was 40 feet from the ICU entrance. Maya was out of the consultation room before the second tone, moving toward the ICU doors, and she was already reading the situation as she went. The alarm was real, in the sense that the sensor had triggered, and false, in the sense that there was no smoke, no heat, no visible source, which meant it had been triggered deliberately. The ICU's evacuation protocol required non-ambulatory patients to shelter in place unless the fire was confirmed within the unit itself. The staff response was to secure the unit and initiate contact with the fire response team. What the protocol did not account for was the 4-second window between the alarm triggering and the security personnel outside Holt's bay responding to the notification on their devices. 4 seconds when attention shifted, when eyes moved to phones and intercoms and the glass panels looking toward the east corridor. Maya was through the ICU doors in 3. The security man outside Bay 3 had his radio in his hand and was looking toward the east corridor. Maya moved past him without slowing and pushed through the bay door. Holt was not looking at the ceiling. He was looking at the ventilation panel on the wall to his right, which was 6 inches open, not broken, open. The screws were still in the panel. It had been released from the other side. She crossed the room in 2 steps, put herself between Holt and the panel, and had enough time to register that there was someone behind it before the panel swung fully open and a hand came through the gap. The hand was holding a device she recognized. Not a gun, smaller. A signal emitter. The type used to overdose specific medical implants, or interfere with IV pump delivery systems. Designed to be plausibly accidental, designed to kill a patient in a post-surgical ICU without leaving evidence that read as anything other than a catastrophic medical event. She caught the wrist. The physics of the next 4 seconds were not elegant. She was not in gear. She was in street clothes, inside a hospital room, with a recovering patient 3 feet behind her and a trained operative on the other side of a ventilation panel trying to get a device within range of a man with a chest full of metal fragments. She broke the grip by torquing the wrist inward at an angle that prioritized speed over control. And the device hit the floor, and the arm withdrew, and she was already shouting for security when she heard the movement in the ceiling. Not the panel, the ceiling, the crawl space above it. Feet moving fast, moving away. The security man from outside the bay was through the door in under 5 seconds. Bryce's people were behind him. The East Corridor alarm continued to blare. She picked up the device from the floor. She held it so Bryce, who had come through the door behind his team, could see it without touching it. He looked at it. His expression did not change, but something behind it did. Medical implant disruptor, she said. Targeted range about 18 inches. It would have looked like a cardiac event, totally consistent with his wound profile. She set it on the bedside tray. Your person in the building didn't come to confirm his location. They came to set up access. The badge breach this morning was a probe. Bryce looked at the ventilation panel. He looked at the ceiling. How did you know? He said. I didn't, she said. I was already in here. Holt was watching from the bed. He was very still. The stillness of a man who had been a target for long enough that he had learned to let the people doing the work do it and not interfere. His heart rate on the monitor had climbed, but he hadn't moved. We need to move him, Maya said. Not the building, the room, somewhere without ceiling access. Bay 6, the ICU charge nurse said from the doorway, because she had been a charge nurse for 19 years and had already been thinking through the same problem. No crawl space above it, concrete service layer. Bay 6, Maya said to Bryce. He nodded once. The transfer took 11 minutes. Maya managed Holt's lines during the move, talking him through each position change in the brief, low-key cadence she used for patients who were hurting and needed to know what was coming before it happened. He did not complain. He also did not look away from her during the entire transfer. When they had him resettled in Bay 6, monitors reattached, drainage systems resecured, she stepped back and did the same check she always did. IV access, dressing integrity, oxygen saturation, the small catalog of things that kept a person alive. You're going to be all right, she said. It was not something she said casually to patients. She said it when she meant it. I know, Holt said, and then, quietly, what's your real name? She was quiet for a moment. It's been Maya for a long time, she said. He looked at her. Okay, he said. Maya. She moved toward the door. Bryce was in the hallway with Cross, his voice low and controlled, the conversation clearly about the ventilation access and how it had been missed in the security sweep. The young man from the operations room was on his phone. The woman in the navy jacket had disappeared, presumably into the ceiling crawl space with 2 other people, pursuing a lead that had a 15-minute head start. Maya stood in the doorway of Bay 6 and looked at the ICU around her. The monitors, the staff moving with urgent efficiency, the ordinary machinery of a place where people came when they were as close to dying as you could get while still being on the right side of it. Her hands were steady. They had been steady the whole time. That was the part that scared her. She had spent 6 years learning to be a woman whose hands were a little uncertain. A woman who deferred to attending physicians and flagged medication errors through proper channels and drank bad coffee without complaint and went home to a second-floor apartment with 2 exits and didn't think about the things she used to know how to do. Her hands had not gotten the message. Cross appeared beside her. The emitter, Cross said. The model, do you know it? It's a Varden-type configuration, Maya said. Militarized, not commercially available. It was reported stolen from a defense contractor storage facility 8 months ago, Cross said. Caverton Defense Solutions. They're one of the 11 contractor names in Holt's package. Maya looked at her. The inside source, Maya said. Whoever is in Bryce's circle. They had this brought in. Yes, Cross said. Which means they knew about the crawl space, Maya said. Which means they had building schematics. Yes. Which means they've been in this building before, Maya said, or someone who works here helped them. Cross was quiet for a moment that said she had already reached the same conclusion and had not wanted to be the one to say it first. We're pulling the access logs for the last 90 days, Cross said. Every credential, every entry point. That'll take hours, Maya said. Yes, Cross said. Maya looked back through the glass at Holt in Bay 6. The monitor above him showed a heart rate that was coming down. 91, 88, 85. His eyes were closed. He was doing what she'd told him to do, staying on his left side, limiting the migration window. She thought about the prepaid message. They found the second shooter. Not the first shooter. The second. Which meant the first shooter had already been found or identified or dealt with. Which meant the information came from someone inside the investigation, and that person had her number. And they had sent the message before the badge breach, before the ventilation panel, before any of this morning's escalation had happened. A warning. From someone who knew what was coming. Someone who wanted Holt alive as much as Bryce did, but was not Bryce, and was not in Bryce's circle, and had therefore used a channel that predated all of it. A channel that only existed because Maya Reyes had existed first. She was still working through the implication of that when her phone buzzed. Not the prepaid. Her regular phone. A hospital extension she recognized. The administrator's office. She answered. Miss Voss? The administrator's voice was clipped and careful. I need you in my office. I'm in the ICU, she said. I understand. This can't wait. A pause. I've been contacted by someone claiming to have information about what happened on this floor this morning. They say they'll only speak to you. Another pause, shorter. They say you'll know who they are when you hear their voice. Maya looked at the glass partition, Holt's monitor, steady. I'll be there in 5 minutes, she said. She hung up. She looked at Cross. Cross was already watching her. Don't follow me, Maya said. Cross held her gaze for a moment. I'll give you 3 minutes, Cross said. It was not agreement. It was the closest thing to it Maya was going to get, so she took it and walked toward the elevator with the particular controlled pace of someone who was not running, because running told people things you didn't want them to know, and she had spent 6 years being very careful about what she allowed people to know about her. She pressed the elevator button. She thought, they found the second shooter. She thought, second. She stepped into the elevator and the doors closed. And what came to her in the descent, quietly, with the particular quality of something assembling itself rather than being thought, was the understanding that there were not 2 shooters because the mission had required 2 shooters. There were 2 shooters because one of them had not been trying to hit Holt. The elevator opened on the 2nd floor, and Maya walked the corridor to the administrator's office with her hands in her jacket pockets and her mind working the problem from the outside in. 2 shooters. One targeting Holt. One not. If the second shooter had not been targeting Holt, there were 3 possibilities. The second shooter had been targeting someone in the convoy, one of the security personnel, the medic, the driver. The second shooter had been targeting a witness or bystander in the vicinity of the ambush site. Or the second shooter had been there to monitor the first shooter, which was a different kind of operation entirely. The kind where someone with a stake in the outcome wanted eyes on the execution and a contingency if the execution went wrong. A handler, a watchdog, someone who didn't trust the contracted killer to finish the job and walk away clean. She pushed through the door to the administrative suite. The administrator was a man named Garrett Finch, late 50s, the kind of professional cordiality that came from 30 years of managing institutional relationships, and under it a genuine competence that Maya had always respected without particularly warming to him. He was standing behind his desk, and he looked like a man who had made a phone call he was not entirely sure had been the right decision. She called the main line, Finch said, 15 minutes ago. Asked for you specifically. Used your full name. She, Maya said. Yes. He glanced at his desk phone. She's on hold. Maya crossed to the desk. She looked at the phone. The hold light blinked steadily. Did she give a name? Maya asked. Nora, he said. Just Nora. Maya picked up the receiver and pressed the line. This is Voss, she said. A pause. Then a voice she had not heard in 6 years. "You always answered on the first ring," the voice said, "even when you were asleep." Her name, the name Maya had known her by, was Nora Sable, and the last time Maya had seen her had been in a situation room in a facility that no longer officially existed, 3 days before Maya Reyes had handed in the paperwork that ended her operational career. Sable had been a signals and communications specialist, technically civilian contracted, but embedded so deep in the operational structure that the distinction was functionally meaningless. She had been the one who could pull a thread of communication out of noise and reconstruct what was said, who said it, and what it meant. She was also the one person from Maya's former life who had known the prepaid number, because she had been the one who set it up. "You sent the message this morning," Maya said. "I sent it last night," Sable said. "The moment I confirmed the convoy destination. You took a while to check." "I haven't had to check in 3 years." "I know," Sable said. "I'm sorry to be the reason you're checking now." A pause. The particular pause of someone measuring how much to say and in what order. The second shooter is a contractor named Devin Marsh, ex-military, private sector for the last 4 years, linked to 2 previous jobs that were attributed to separate causes. He was on the roof of a parking structure 2 blocks from the ambush site. "You have him?" Maya said. "We have him," Sable said, "as of 4 hours ago. He's talking because talking is the better option, and he's experienced enough to know the math." Another pause. "The name he gave us for the contract employer, the one who hired the primary shooter and positioned Marsh's oversight, is someone you need to hear sitting down." Finch was watching from across the room, trying not to appear to be listening and failing. Maya turned slightly away from him. "Tell me," she said. "Deputy Director Raymond Coyle," Sable said. DIA. The hold light on the desk phone continued to blink. "Bryce's deputy," Maya said. "Bryce's second," Sable confirmed. "In the circle of 4 that Holt identified, the people with full operational visibility on his movements, Coyle is the one who processed the deployment schedules for the last 8 months. He also authorized the security access credentials for 3 of the contractor facilities in Holt's evidence package." Her voice dropped slightly. "He's been selling schedule information for 14 months. Holt's investigation got close enough that Coyle needed it to stop before the evidence package was complete. He contracted the hit through a cutout at Caverton Defense, used Marsh as quality control." "And the badge breach this morning," Maya said. "The ventilation access." "Coyle," Sable said. "He had Harlow regional schematics from a facilities contract processed through his office 7 months ago. Routine security review, legitimate purpose on paper, completely exploitable." Maya looked at the far wall of Finch's office. There was a framed photograph of the hospital's original building, 1962, taken from the east side. She looked at it without seeing it. "Bryce doesn't know," she said. "Bryce doesn't know," Sable confirmed, "and Coyle is still inside the building." The silence that followed lasted perhaps 2 seconds, but felt longer. "What do you need from me?" Maya said. "Holt's evidence package," Sable said. "Holt trusts you. He doesn't fully trust Bryce's team right now, and he's right not to, because he can't know which member of that circle is the problem. If he transfers the package location to Bryce directly, Coyle will know within minutes." The voice on the line was level and precise. "We need the package out of Holt's control and into an independent chain before Coyle realizes Marsh is talking." "How long do we have?" "Marsh's detention is off book for now," Sable said. "Coyle will notice Marsh has gone dark eventually. Best estimate, 2 to 4 hours before he starts looking for an exit." "Where are you?" Maya asked. "Close," Sable said. "I've been close since last night." Maya thought about saying more. There was more to say. 6 years of distance and silence, and the particular complicated weight of a friendship that had ended not with a fight, but with a door closing quietly. She did not say it. "I'll call you back on this line, Maya said. 40 minutes. She hung up. She looked at Finch. "The call never happened," she said. Finch opened his mouth. He looked at her expression. He closed his mouth. "Is Commander Holt's recovery being properly managed?" he said instead. "Yes," she said. "Then I suggest you go manage it," he said. She did not go directly back to the fourth floor. She went to the second floor supply corridor first, which was quiet at this hour, and she stood in the fluorescent-lit stillness between a linen cart and a medication dispensing unit, and she thought about Raymond Coyle. She had not met him in the conference room. He had not been among the 4 people Bryce brought, which meant he was elsewhere in the building, managing his piece of this from a position that looked like oversight. He would have communications access. He would be monitoring the security response to the ventilation breach. He would know by now that the device had not reached Holt, and he would be calculating. A man in Coyle's position, when a contracted operation failed twice in 12 hours, had limited options. He could extract, leave the building, disappear into whatever contingency he had built for this eventuality, and forfeit whatever leverage he still had over the network. He could escalate. A third attempt, different method, the kind of escalation that became harder to control and more likely to leave evidence. Or he could reposition, find a way to get close to the investigation's conclusion and shape it before the evidence came together. Repositioning was the most dangerous option and the most likely one for someone who had survived 14 months inside a counterintelligence investigation without detection. It required nerve and it required access, and Coyle had both. She pulled out her phone and called Cross. "Where's Coyle right now?" she said when Cross picked up. A beat. "How do you know about Coyle?" "Answer the question." Another beat, shorter. "He was in the administrative conference room 20 minutes ago. Hold on." The sound of movement. A muffled exchange. "He left the conference room 8 minutes ago. We don't have eyes on him." "You need to find him," Maya said. "Now. And you need to do it without tipping that you're looking." "Maya," Cross's voice shifted. "What did you find out?" "I'll explain when I'm back upstairs. Don't tell Bryce anything yet. Not until I'm in the room." "You're asking me to—" "I'm asking you to hold for 15 minutes, Maya said. "If I'm wrong, you've lost 15 minutes. If I'm right, you've saved the investigation." The silence on the line lasted 4 seconds. 14 minutes, Cross said. She went to the ICU. Holt was awake in Bay 6, left side down as instructed, the monitor above him showing numbers that were moving in the right direction. The ICU charge nurse gave Maya a look that asked a question without using words, and Maya answered it with a slight nod that said, "I'll handle the paperwork later," which was a conversation they had evolved over the course of a long morning into something that functioned like a working language. She pulled the curtain. She sat in the chair beside Holt's bed. "I need the location of the evidence package," she said. "Not because Bryce sent me, because there's a clock running that you don't know about yet." She told him. Compact, efficient. Sable, Marsh, Coyle, the timeline. She watched his face as she spoke, watched the specific quality of the anger that came up when she said Coyle's name. It was not surprise. It was the anger of a man who had been 3 possibilities narrowed to 1 and was now sitting with the certainty he had not wanted. "Coyle processed the logistics for my last 4 deployments," Holt said, "before the investigation started." "I know," she said. "He knew everything about my operational patterns before I started documenting his," Holt said. "That's how they got the placement right." He stopped. The breath cost him. "The shooter wasn't guessing where to hit me. Coyle gave them the medical file." She absorbed this. Pre-existing medical records. They had known which wound configuration would create the most surgically complex intervention because they had known his history, previous injuries, structural vulnerabilities, the specific architecture of a body that had spent decades in hostile environments. "The package," she said, because the timeline didn't allow for the full weight of it right now. Holt looked at her. "There's a law office," he said. "Brennan and Associates, 2 blocks north of the federal courthouse in this city. 3rd floor. The managing partner is a woman named Sylvie Okafor. She has a sealed envelope in her firm's secured document storage with my name and a file reference number." He paused. "She doesn't know what's in it. I told her it was estate documentation. The instruction on the envelope is to release it to any federal law enforcement officer presenting badge number 7714-Alpha-Kessler. "Whose badge number?" "Inspector General's office," Holt said. "An investigator named Pauline Dresch. She's not DIA. She's not connected to any of the 4 people in my circle. She's been conducting a parallel inquiry through a completely separate channel for the last 3 months. He held Maya's gaze. She doesn't know the package exists, but she has the context to understand it the moment she opens it. Sable can reach her, Maya said. Sable knows Dresch? Holt said. Sable knows everyone, Mom, Maya said. And for a moment, one fraction of a moment, she almost smiled. Go, Holt said. And Voss. She was already moving. Coyle is smart. Don't let him get to a position where someone else takes the consequence and he steps back. She pushed through the curtain. Molt. She called Sable from the stairwell. She gave her Okafor's name and the file reference, and Dresch's badge number in under 45 seconds. Sable did not ask her to repeat anything. Dresch can be at the law office in under an hour, Sable said. How are you on Coyle? Working on it, Maya said. Keep Marsh isolated. Whatever you're doing to keep his detention off book, keep doing it. We're good for another 90 minutes, Sable said. After that, the people holding him need a formal handoff. 90 minutes is enough, Maya said. She went back up to 4. Cross was in the hall outside the ICU, and her expression told Maya the 14 minutes had not gone quietly. He's in the building, Cross said, low and tight. Coyle. We found him on camera that he went to the basement level. There's a telecommunications hub down there. If he accesses the building's internal communication system, he's not accessing the communication system, Maya said. He's transmitting. He has a device on him, something that uses the building's hardline infrastructure as a boost. He's trying to reach whoever is managing the network from outside while he still has time. Cross stared at her. How? Because that's what I would do, Maya said. In his position. If my contracted assets had failed twice and I needed to reposition, I'd want to talk to the people who could still move before I decided whether to run or stay. If he transmits the package location, he doesn't have the package location, Maya said. Nobody told him. Cross absorbed this. Then, Bryce? Tell him, Maya said, right now, all of it. He needs to know, and he needs to move on the basement before Coyle finishes whatever he's doing down there. Cross was already on her phone. What happened in the basement telecommunications hub of Harlow Regional Medical Center over the next 22 minutes was not the kind of thing that got described accurately in reports. The official account would note that Deputy Director Raymond Coyle was apprehended in a restricted access area while in possession of an unauthorized transmission device, and that the apprehension was conducted by DYA, personnel under Director Bryce's authority with hospital security cooperation. What actually happened was messier. Coyle had almost finished the transmission when Bryce's people came through the door, and almost was the operative word. The signal had gone out in fragments, partial information, enough to alert the network that the operation was compromised, but not enough to give anyone actionable next steps. Which meant the network had warning, but no direction, which was its own kind of problem, but a manageable one compared to the alternative. Coyle did not go quietly. He was a man who had built 14 months of operational cover and had not survived that long by being careless or by underestimating situations. He had 2 exits from the telecom hub that he had identified in advance, and he used the knowledge of both to make the apprehension take 4 minutes longer than it should have, while he assessed whether any path forward existed. None did. Maya wasn't in the basement. She stayed on 4 because Holt's drainage output had spiked slightly during the morning's sustained stress. Not dramatically, not dangerously, but enough that she adjusted the system calibration and sat with the monitor readings for 10 minutes, making sure the trend line was correcting. It was. She noted it in the chart. Odom came into the bay at 11:53. She looked at the chart. She looked at the adjustment Maya had made. "You're not on shift," Odom said. "No," Maya agreed. Odom looked at the monitor. She looked at Holt, who was doing the thing he did, staying very still, managing his situation with the focused attention of someone who had decided that cooperation with the medical management was the most useful thing he could contribute right now. "The adjustment was correct," Odom said. "It cost her something to say it. Not much. Less than it might have cost her yesterday." "Thank you," Maya said. Odom nodded once and left without further commentary. It was, Maya thought, about as much as you could reasonably expect from a surgeon who had spent a morning being shown the limits of her own framing. Odom was good. She was going to be better for this eventually. That was how it sometimes worked, when the collision between what you thought you knew and what was actually true happened hard enough to leave a mark. Holt. Bryce came to the fourth floor at 12:31 p.m. He came alone, which was unusual. His people had been in a four-person formation all morning. The aloneness was deliberate. He looked like a man who had been hit in a specific place and was deciding how to carry it. He found Maya at the nursing station, updating a supply log. "Coyle is in custody," he said. "I know," she said. "The transmission he sent was incomplete. Our signals team is reconstructing the fragments." He stood beside the station. He did not sit. The network he was communicating with, 3 of the other contractor names in Holt's package are directly connected to it. We're executing warrants within the hour. "Dresch has the package," Maya said. "I know that too," Bryce said. "She called me 14 minutes ago." He paused. "You built a parallel channel." "I used one that already existed," Maya said, "for exactly the reason Holt anticipated. Your circle had a problem, and Holt knew it. He just didn't know which one." "He trusted you," Bryce said, "over 4 people who have been cleared at the highest level." "He trusted what he saw in that room last night," Maya said. "That's not about me specifically. That's about what the room showed him." Bryce was quiet for a moment. He had the look of a man reassessing a series of conclusions. "Sable," he said. "She's been running the parallel track for how long?" "That's not my information to give you," Maya said. He accepted this. Whatever else Bryce was, he was precise enough to know which battles were worth the cost. "The oversight panel convenes in 12 days, he said. "Holt needs to testify. His wound status is progressing appropriately," Maya said. "The fragment migration has stabilized. He'll be ambulatory with assistance in 4 to 5 days. Testimony capability in 10, if he's careful with the recovery." She paused. "He needs to stay here for the next 72 hours minimum. After that, a secure medical facility with appropriate thoracic support." "I'll arrange it," Bryce said. "Then, there will be a formal statement of record about your role in this, the things you identified, the actions you took." "That's your decision," Maya said. "Holt has already requested it," Bryce said. He was quite specific. Maya looked down at the supply log. She made a notation. The notation was not about anything important. "Do whatever is appropriate," she said. 10. At 2:15 p.m., the first news came out. Not from DIA, not from the hospital. From a wire service that had received an anonymous tip about an arrest at a federal facility connected to a defense contractor investigation. No names, no details, just the shape of something large and institutional collapsing at its foundation. The tip had come from someone Maya suspected was Sable, who had always understood that certain information moved most effectively when it moved publicly. By 3 p.m., Caverton Defense Solutions had issued a statement through their legal team saying they were cooperating with ongoing federal inquiries. The statement had the particular character of something written in a hurry by people who had been surprised, which meant Coyle's fragmented transmission had not given the network enough lead time to prepare. Maya watched this from the nursing station on 4, on her phone between chart updates, tracking the public face of something she had spent the last 14 hours inside. Darlene appeared beside her at 3:20. "The administrator is fielding calls from 3 different federal agencies," Darlene said. "He looks like a man who went to sleep in one life and woke up in another." "He's handling it well," Maya said. "He is," Darlene agreed. She was quiet for a moment. "Are you okay?" Maya thought about the question. It was a genuine question, asked by a genuine person who had covered for her and not pushed her and given her bad coffee, and 2 years of uncomplicated professional respect. "I'm tired," Maya said. Which was true, and was also not the complete answer, and was also, she thought, as much as she was able to give right now. Darlene nodded. "Go check on your patient," she said. "Then go home and sleep." She went to check on Holt at 4 p.m. He was more alert than he had been that morning, the sedation residue wearing off, the pain management calibrated to a level that let him function rather than simply endure. He was reading something on a tablet that one of Bryce's people had brought him. He set it down when Maya came in. Caverton issued a statement, he said. I saw it, she said. Coyle was their primary inside contact, Holt said. For 14 months, everything they needed to know about DIA operational schedules that intersected with their contracts moved through him. He paused. 16 people named in that package. Most of them didn't know they were connected to each other. Coyle was the architecture. He held it together, Maya said. Until he couldn't. Until you pulled the thread, Holt said. I held a wrist and called a phone number, she said. The thread was already there. He looked at her with the particular expression of someone deciding not to argue a point that wasn't worth the energy it would cost. Dresch called me, he said. She's read the package. She said... He stopped. She said it was the most complete evidentiary documentation she'd seen on a case this size, that the sourcing was meticulous. You did good work, Maya said. I almost didn't get to finish it, he said. She checked his IV, his dressing, the drainage output. Everything was within range. The fragment on the imaging was where it had been that morning. No further migration, the left side positioning holding the trajectory stable. You need to eat, she said. The nursing staff should have brought a tray 2 hours ago. They did, he said. I'm not hungry. You're in post-surgical recovery with an active wound site, and you need calories, she said. Being not hungry isn't relevant. He looked at her. Something in his expression shifted. Not quite amusement, but something adjacent to it. The very slight relaxation of a man who had been running on adrenaline and controlled stillness for 20 hours and was only now beginning to let the operating system slow down. Yes, ma'am, he said. She made a note in the chart and moved toward the door. Voss, he said. She stopped. The things you know how to do, he said. The way you think, the way you move in a room when something is happening. He was looking at the far wall, not at her. You didn't lose that when you left. You just stopped using it. I know, she said. I'm not saying you should go back, he said. I'm saying, don't work so hard to pretend it's not there. He turned his head to look at her. It saved my life twice. She was quiet for a moment. Get some sleep, she said. You have 12 days of recovery before you have to tell a Senate panel what you know. She walked out. She was in the stairwell, heading down, when her phone buzzed. Sable. Text this time, not a call. Dresch is filing the formal charge package with the AG's office tonight. Coyle and 2 Caverton principals. The other 13 names in Holt's package, DOJ, is opening separate inquiries. This is going to take months to move through the system. Maya typed back. I know. A pause. Then, I'm outside. East parking lot. If you want to talk. She stood in the stairwell with her hand on the door to the lobby level. 6 years. The door that had closed quietly. The life she had built in the space after it. She pushed through the door and walked toward the east parking lot, and she was still walking when her phone buzzed one more time. Not Sable, a number she didn't recognize. Local area code. She answered. Is this Maya Voss? A woman's voice, precise, unhurried, with the particular cadence of someone accustomed to asking questions in environments where the answers mattered. Yes, Maya said. This is Inspector General Investigator Pauline Dresch, the voice said. I've spent the last 2 hours reading Commander Holt's evidence package and speaking with my supervisors about how to proceed. I'd like to speak with you about your role in today's events, but that's not the primary reason I'm calling. A pause. I'm calling because when I reviewed the package, I found something Holt included as a supplemental note, a single paragraph at the end. Maya slowed her walk. What did it say? She asked. It said that the network's inside reach was broader than the 16 names he documented, Dresch said. He believed there was a secondary tier, people not directly involved in the procurement fraud or the technology transfer, but providing intelligence support at a different level. And he left a note suggesting that the evidence for the secondary tier was not in the package, that he had identified one person in the secondary tier but had not been able to confirm the others before the investigation was interrupted. Maya had stopped walking. He named the person he had identified, Dresch said. The one in the secondary tier. The one providing intelligence support. The east parking lot was visible through the lobby doors. Maya could see the late afternoon light on the pavement, and at the far edge of the lot, a figure she recognized by posture alone, standing beside a car, waiting. "Who was it?" Maya said. Dresch said a name. Maya's hand tightened on the phone. The figure in the parking lot had not moved. The name Dresch said was Nora Sable. Maya stood in the lobby with the east parking lot visible through the glass doors and Sable's figure visible at the far edge of it, and she did not move. She did not breathe differently. She did not do any of the things that a body does when the ground shifts beneath it, because she had spent too many years training those responses out of herself, and the training held even now, even for this. "How certain is Holt?" she said. "The note was 3 paragraphs," Dresch said. "He wrote it as a separate addendum, sealed separately from the main package. He said he hadn't included it in the formal evidence because he only had circumstantial connectivity, communication pattern analysis, timing correlations between Sable's signals work and operational security failures that preceded the network's activities by several months." A pause. "He wasn't certain enough to name her formally. He was certain enough to document it." "What kind of communication pattern analysis?" "Routing signatures," Dresch said. "Someone with advanced signals capability was accessing a monitoring channel connected to 3 of the contractor facilities in the package. The access was masked well, better than standard, but the masking technique itself was identifiable, a specific methodology." Another pause. Holt cross-referenced it against a database of known signals operators. Sable came up as the strongest match. Maya watched the figure in the parking lot. Sable had not moved. She was standing with her weight slightly forward, the way she always stood when she was waiting for something she was not entirely sure was coming. "A match isn't confirmation," Maya said. "No," Dresch agreed. "It isn't. That's why I'm calling you instead of dispatching a team." A careful pause. "You know her. You knew her before. Whatever that means for what I'm about to ask, I need your honest assessment of whether this is worth pursuing as a formal inquiry, or whether it's a contaminated lead built on pattern analysis that points at the most technically qualified person who could have done it rather than the person who actually did." Maya looked at the lobby doors. She thought about the prepaid number. The message last night. They found the second shooter. A message that had arrived before the badge breach, before the ventilation attempt, before any of the morning's events. A message that had pulled Maya back to the hospital and into position to intercept the device in Holt's room. She thought about what it meant that the message had been sent before those events. It meant Sable had known they were coming, and the question that had a clean answer and a complicated one, and Maya was going to have to decide which one she believed before she walked through those doors, was whether Sable had known because she had been monitoring the network and tracking its next move, or because she had been inside it long enough to know what had been planned. She thought about the 2-shooter configuration. The second shooter positioned as quality control, as oversight, a watchdog for the contracted killer, someone who didn't trust the primary operation to go cleanly. She thought about the way that role, watchdog, observer, person with eyes on the execution, was identical to the role that a handler played. And a handler could work for the people running the operation, or a handler could work against them, feeding information back to a parallel track that had its own agenda. She thought about Sable standing in the parking lot, waiting. Sable had always been good at waiting. "Give me 20 minutes, Maya said. She pushed through the lobby doors. The afternoon air was cooler than it had been that morning, the light going sideways and long across the parking lot pavement. She walked towards Sable at a pace that was neither urgent nor casual, and she kept her hands out of her pockets, and she watched Sable's body language the way she had once watched terrain for the things that didn't fit the pattern. Sable watched her come. She did not shift her weight. She did not look away. She had always been someone who met things directly. It was one of the qualities Maya had respected in her back when respecting things about Sable had been uncomplicated. "Dresch called you," Sable said. Not a question. "Yes," Maya said. They were 6 feet apart, close enough for a normal conversation, far enough that the space between them was still a decision, not an accident. "She told you about Holt's addendum," Sable said. "Yes." Sable looked at her for a moment. The The particular quality of her expression was something Maya had to work to read. Not because it was masked, but because it was layered, the way some people's faces were when they were carrying more than one true thing at the same time. "Do you think it's true?" Sable asked. "I think you sent me a warning this morning," Maya said, "and I think the question of why you sent it has two different answers, and they lead to very different places." "What are the two answers?" "You're working against the network," Maya said. "You identified Marsh, you tracked the convoy, you've been running a parallel operation to expose what Coyle was doing. The warning was because you wanted Holt protected." She paused. "Or you were inside the network, and at some point you decided to get out, and the warning was you beginning to cover your exit." Sable was quiet. "Both of those things can look identical from where I'm standing," Maya said. "I know," Sable said. "So tell me which one is true." The parking lot was quiet around them. A car moved through the far lane. Somewhere inside the building, the ordinary business of a hospital continued without them. "Both," Sable said, "in sequence." Thoughts. She talked for 11 minutes. Maya listened without interrupting, which was harder than it appeared. Sable had been recruited by the network 22 months ago, not as an operative, as a resource. Someone who knew how signals moved and how to make certain communications invisible. She had taken the initial contact because she had thought it was a counterintelligence approach, a sting operation run by an agency she didn't have clearance to identify. And by the time she understood it wasn't, she was in far enough that extraction was complicated. "I didn't give them operational data," Sable said. "I gave them routing cover. The ability to move communications without standard monitoring catching them. I told myself that was different." She stopped. "It isn't different. I know that." "When did you start working against them?" Maya said. "When I understood the scope," Sable said. 8 months ago. I started documenting, quietly, using the access they thought they had over me to feed information back the other direction. She looked at Maya directly. "The routing signatures Holt found, those are mine." "He's right about that. He's wrong about what they mean. I was accessing the contractor monitoring channels because I was building the connectivity map that Dresch now has." "You were the source for Dresch's parallel inquiry," Maya said. "I was a source," Sable said. "One of several. I couldn't be the only one. If the network identified me as the leak, everything disappeared. So I built multiple channels, multiple entry points." She paused. "Marsh was one of the people I identified. I flagged him to a contact 4 days ago. That's how he was picked up this morning." "Your contact," Maya said. "Who?" "Someone in the IG's office," Sable said. "Someone who isn't Dresch, who doesn't know Dresch, who came at this from a completely different angle." She held Maya's gaze. "I built it so that no single person could see the whole picture, so that if anyone in the chain was compromised, the rest would hold." Maya looked at her. "That's a good architecture," Maya said quietly. "I had a good teacher," Sable said, "and there was something in that, not quite grief, but something adjacent to it, the weight of a history that had been put away and was now here in a parking lot being handled in the late afternoon light." Maya thought about what she was being asked to decide, because this was a decision. Dresch was waiting for her call, and what Maya said in the next 10 minutes would determine whether Nora Sable became a subject of formal inquiry or a protected source who had spent 8 months doing something genuinely dangerous from the inside. The evidence pointed both directions. The routing signatures were real. The access was real. The question was intent, and intent was the hardest thing in the world to prove in a formal evidentiary context, which was exactly why Holt had put it in a sealed addendum rather than the main package. "The connectivity map you built," Maya said. "Where is it?" "Encrypted, off-site, 3 separate locations," Sable said. "Accessible through a key sequence I can provide to Dresch directly." "You'd go on record?" "Yes," Sable said. "I was inside it. I know I can't walk away from that without accountability. What I can do is give them everything I have and let the process determine what that's worth." Maya looked at her for a long moment. There was a version of this where she said, "I can't make that call. Dresch will have to investigate. And whatever the investigation finds is what it finds." It was the version that protected Maya from any implication of partiality, from the suggestion that 6 years of shared history had colored her judgment. There was another version. Call Dresch, Maya said. Right now, from your phone. Tell her you want to make a voluntary statement and that you have encrypted documentation supporting your account. She held Sable's gaze. Don't tell her I said to call. Don't reference this conversation. If what you're telling me is true, the documentation will show it without my endorsement. Sable looked at her. And if it doesn't? Then you go through the process, Maya said. Same as everyone else. A pause. That's fair, Sable said. It's the only version that works, Maya said, for you and for what you built. Sable nodded slowly. She pulled out her phone. She looked at Maya one more time. I'm sorry, she said, for making you part of this. I needed someone whose positioning I could trust, and there wasn't anyone else. I know, Maya said. She turned and walked back toward the hospital while Sable dialed. Dresch called back 47 minutes later. Maya was in the break room on the second floor, sitting with a cup of coffee. She was actually tasting this time when the call came in. Sable's account is consistent with the connectivity map, Dresch said. I've had 2 analysts on the encryption for the last 30 minutes. The documentation structure, the sourcing, the timeline. It tracks. A pause. It's going to require formal review before any immunity framework can be established. There are things she participated in that need to be on the record, but the evidentiary value of what she's provided, Dresch stopped. It's not an overstatement to say she may have given us the secondary tier complete. How many names? Maya said. 9 additional, Dresch said. 3 of them are currently in positions that require immediate action. I've already made the calls. Maya sat with that for a moment. 25 names total, 11 contractors, 5 active duty from Holt's original package, 9 from Sable's secondary documentation. A network that had been operating for over a year, moving money and technology and information through channels built to look like institutional routine. The AG's office is filing tonight, Maya said. On Coyle and the 2 Caverton principles, Dresch said. The others will follow as the evidentiary review's complete. This is going to move through the system for months, possibly longer. I know, Maya said. Miss Voss. Dresch's voice shifted slightly. A register change that had something careful in it. I've spoken with Director Bryce about your role in today's events, and I've read the supplemental statement Holt requested be added to his record. A pause. I'd like to formally request an interview when you're ready, not as a subject, as a witness and as a professional resource. I understand, Maya said. You don't have to agree to anything right now, Dresch said, but I'd like you to know the request is open. Maya looked at the break room wall, the same institutional off-white it had been for 2 years, the same bulletin board with the same parking enforcement reminder that had been there since she started and that nobody ever took down. I'll think about it, she said. She meant it. That was the strange part. She actually meant it. She went back to the ICU at 6. Holt had eaten. The tray was half finished, which was better than nothing. His color was better. The numbers on the monitor were better. He was awake, and he put down the tablet when she came in and did not pretend he hadn't been watching the door. Dresch called me, he said. I know, she said. She told me about Sable. He watched Maya's face. Are you all right? I'm fine, she said. The drainage output is good. Fragment position is holding. You're on track. That's not what I asked, he said. She sat in the chair beside his bed, something she hadn't done all day, had been in motion all day, had been in every room in this building except stationary. She sat, and she let the weight of the past 20 hours settle into her the way it had been waiting to do since 11:47 the previous night. I don't know yet, she said honestly. She was someone I trusted, and what she was doing she did for the right reasons eventually. But eventually is doing a lot of work in that sentence. It usually does, Holt said. She's going to face a formal review, Maya said. Whatever framework comes out of that is going to be complicated. There are things she did that can't be walked back just because her intent shifted. No, Holt said. They can't. And she knows that, Maya said. She made the call to Dresch herself. He was quiet for a moment. That matters, he said. Yes, Maya said. It does. They sat with that, not comfortably, but honestly, which was the better of the two options. The oversight panel is in 11 days, Holt said. I'm going to testify about everything. The network, Coil, the investigation, the evidence package, and I'm going to testify about what happened here. He looked at her. What you did. You don't need to. I know I don't need to, he said. I'm going to. She looked at the monitor. The numbers were steady. A person's vital signs, read in sequence, told a kind of story. Not the whole story, never the whole story, but the part that mattered most at any given moment. Right now, Holt's story was stable, recovering, not finished. Get some rest, she said. You too, he said. Go home, Voss. You've been here for 22 hours. I know how long I've been here. Then go. She stood. She checked the IV one more time because she always checked the IV one more time, and she updated the monitoring note in the chart, and she turned to leave. Maya, Holt said. She stopped. He had used her first name twice now. She didn't correct it. Thank you, he said. Not for the procedure, not for the evidence chain, for staying. She looked at him. You didn't make me stay, she said. I know, he said. That's what I'm thanking you for. She drove home as the city went dark around her. Caldwell Point, at 7 in the evening, had a specific quality. The commuter traffic thinning out, the restaurants picking up, the particular in-between energy of a city that hadn't yet decided what it was going to be when it grew up. She had chosen it for reasons that had nothing to do with its character and everything to do with its anonymity, and now she drove through it and looked at it differently in a way she couldn't entirely explain. She parked. She went upstairs. She stood in her kitchen and did not make coffee and did not check either phone and did not do any of the calibrating, inventory-taking things she usually did when she came home from a shift. She stood at the kitchen window and looked at the street below. 6 years ago, she had walked out of a life that had taken everything she had and asked for more, and she had built something quieter in its place, and she had told herself the quieter thing was enough. She had told herself that the part of her that knew how to do the other things, the reading of rooms, the three-dimensional thinking, the steady hands under pressure, was a chapter she had finished. She had believed it mostly. There were nights she believed it completely. Tonight, she didn't believe it at all. Not because she wanted to go back. She didn't. The wanting to go back feeling had died somewhere in the 6th month of the first year after she left and had not returned. What she felt now was different. Not a desire for the past, but an acknowledgement of the present, which was that she was 34 years old and she had a set of capabilities that did not stop existing because she stopped using them professionally. And the question of what to do with that was genuinely open in a way it hadn't been that morning. Dresch's request sat in the back of her mind. Not a demand, an opening. She thought about Holt's 11 days of recovery ahead of him. She thought about Odom, who was going to be a better surgeon for what this week had cost her. She thought about Darlene saying, go check on your patient, the way she said most true things, without ceremony, without making a performance of the fact that she had seen something and decided to trust it. She thought about Sable in a room somewhere in this city, talking to Dresch's people, laying out the architecture of 8 months of terrifying interior work, doing the accounting. There was no version of that story where everything came out clean. There was a version where it came out honest, and honest was what Sable had chosen, and Maya was going to hold that alongside everything else and let time determine what it weighed. She went to bed at 8:15. She slept without difficulty, which surprised her, and then she thought about it, and it didn't surprise her at all. 3 days later, Coyle appeared in federal court for an arraignment that lasted 40 minutes and was covered by 2 wire services and a national outlet that had been following the Caverton defense story since the initial tip. He was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, and federal procurement fraud. His attorney entered a not guilty plea in the flat, professional tone of someone who had read the evidence summary and understood the math. The 2 Caverton principals were arraigned the following morning. By the end of that week, 4 of the 9 names from Sable's secondary tier had been formally charged. The others were in varying stages of the legal process that Dresch had described: methodical, slow, and, as far as Maya could tell from the fragments that became public, thorough. Sable's status was designated as a cooperating witness. The formal review was ongoing. Maya did not follow it closely. She had said what she had to say to Dresch in a 2-hour recorded interview 4 days after the hospital events, and she had said it as accurately and completely as she could, and what happened after that was the process doing its work, which was the only thing you could ask of a process. Holt was transferred to a secure medical facility on day 5, as Maya had projected. She got a text from a number she didn't recognize. She recognized it, that said, "Numbers are good. Thank you." She did not reply. It didn't require a reply. On day 7, Dr. Francesca Odom stopped Maya in the corridor outside the surgical suites on the 3rd floor. "I've been asked to consult on a case," Odom said. "Complex thoracic wound management, multiple fragments, unusual deflection pattern." She paused in the specific way she had of pausing when something was costing her. "I want to understand the imaging methodology you used in Bay 1, the trajectory mapping." Maya looked at her. "I have an hour Thursday morning," Maya said. "I'll put it on the schedule," Odom said. She turned to leave. Then, without turning back, "You saw something in that scan that I missed. I've been thinking about why." A pause. "I think I looked at the entry point and built my model forward. You looked at the terminal position and built it backward." "Yes," Maya said. "That's not in any standard clinical training," Odom said. "No," Maya said. "It isn't." Odom left without further comment. Maya watched her go and thought that this was how some things changed, not in the large dramatic moment, but in the corridor afterward, in the willingness of a person to look at the gap between what they knew and what was actually true and choose to understand it rather than defend against it. 2 weeks after the night of the convoy, Maya met with Pauline Dresch in a conference room at the Federal Building downtown. Dresch was a compact woman in her mid-50s with reading glasses she kept taking on and off, and a way of listening that made you feel like every word was being accurately received, which was either a cultivated professional skill or simply who she was. Maya decided after 10 minutes that it was simply who she was. They talked for 3 hours, not just about what had happened at Harlow Regional, about the larger picture, the network Dresch was dismantling piece by piece, the secondary tier, the gaps in oversight that had allowed something this size to operate for 14 months inside institutions built to prevent exactly this. Dresch had questions that were sharp and specific and that assumed a level of operational fluency Maya hadn't been asked to demonstrate in 6 years. She answered them at the same level they were asked, without hedging, and at some point in the second hour she stopped noticing that she was doing it. At the end, Dresch put down her pen and looked at her. "The IG's office has a consultative framework," she said. "It's not employment. It's not operational assignment. It's a structure that allows individuals with specific expertise to contribute to ongoing investigations on a case-by-case basis, maintaining their primary professional roles." She held Maya's gaze. "I'm going to send you the details. You can read them or not read them. You don't owe me an answer." "I'll read them," Maya said. Dresch nodded. She put her reading glasses back on. "Commander Holt testified before the oversight panel yesterday," she said, not looking up from the notes she was making. "Closed session. I can't tell you what he said. I can tell you that when the session ended, 3 members of the panel requested a follow-up briefing on the medical events at Harlow Regional." She paused. "Specifically on the identification of the wound pattern. They wanted to understand how it was possible." "What did Holt tell them?" Maya said. "He told them a nurse saw what the doctors missed," Dresch said, "and then he told them that wasn't quite accurate." She looked up. "He said a person with an exceptional understanding of how people get hurt had ended up in a room where that understanding saved a life, and that the system that had initially failed to recognize what she was had ultimately benefited from the fact that she was there regardless." Maya was quiet. "He's not wrong," Dresch said. And then she went back to her notes, which was how Maya understood the meeting was over. She drove back to this hospital. It was a Tuesday, early afternoon, light and mild, the kind of day that Caldwell Point sometimes produced in a way that made you think well of it against your better judgment. She parked in the staff lot. She went in through the side entrance. She signed into her shift 20 minutes early, which was not unusual for her, and Darlene was at the nursing station doing the same thorough, methodical work she always did, and did not make a thing of Maya's early arrival. Bay 3 needs vitals, Darlene said. Bromley ordered a medication reconciliation on Bay 5, and there's fresh coffee, actual coffee, not the institutional stuff. Someone left a bag in the break room. Who left it? Maya said. No idea, Darlene said. No note, just good coffee. Maya looked at Darlene. Darlene looked at Maya. Neither of them said what they were thinking, which was probably a reasonable approach to the day. Maya went to check on the patient in Bay 3. She took the vitals. She updated the chart. She caught a potential interaction between two medications in Bay 5's reconciliation and flagged it to Bromley directly, who looked at the flag and revised the order without pushback. She helped a 70-year-old man in Bay 7 understand his discharge instructions in plain language rather than medical language, and she sat with him for an extra 4 minutes because he was going home alone, and understanding things alone was harder than understanding things with someone. She drank 1 cup of the good coffee. At 9:30 that night, during the quiet hour, she sat at the nursing station and opened the email Dresch had sent earlier in the afternoon. She read the consultative framework document twice. It was 14 pages. It was carefully written. It was, she thought, the kind of document produced by people who understood that some things couldn't be forced into clean categories and had decided to build the framework around that reality instead of pretending it wasn't true. She closed the email. She thought for a while. There was a version of the life ahead of her where she stayed exactly what she had been for 6 years. The nurse nobody knew, the woman whose hands were steadier than her history, the person who flagged medication errors and drank bad coffee and kept her exits counted. It was not a bad version. It had been an honest version, or as close to honest as she'd been able to manage. There was another version, one where she was still all of those things, and was also, carefully and deliberately, and on her own terms, something more. She had spent 6 years trying to put distance between herself and what she knew how to do. She had believed the distance was the point. She understood now that the distance had been protection, necessary at the time, necessary for longer than she would have chosen if she'd had a choice, but that protection was not the same as purpose, and she had been using one to substitute for the other for long enough. Holt's testimony, Dresch's framework, Odom's corridor acknowledgement, Darlene's coffee that wasn't Darlene's coffee, left anonymously by someone who understood that some gestures worked better without attribution. None of it undid what had happened 6 years ago. None of it answered the questions she still carried about the mission that had ended her operational career and the decisions that had been made above her that she had never been asked to account for and had never stopped accounting for in the private ledger she kept in the back of her mind. But the ledger was not the whole of what she was. She had gone into that bay 22 nights ago because a man was dying and she could see what the doctors couldn't, and whatever complicated calculus had brought her to that moment, the moment itself had been simple. She had moved. She had done what she knew how to do. And it had mattered in a way that was clear and specific and completely beyond argument. That was worth something. That was worth, she thought, building around. She reopened the email. She drafted a reply. Short, 3 sentences. She would meet with Dresch again. She was willing to discuss the framework in more detail. She had one condition, which was that her primary role remained her nursing work and the consultative function would not compromise it. She read the 3 sentences over. She sent the email. She went back to her charts. Outside the window of the nursing station, Caldwell Point went on being itself. Imperfect, mid-sized, neither remarkable nor forgettable. The kind of city where a person could disappear completely or could choose slowly and with intention not to. The ER below her was doing what ERs did at this hour. The steady, unglamorous work of keeping people alive through the night. No dramatic arrivals. No convoys. Just the ordinary emergency of existing, which was its own kind of war, fought in the same place every day by people whose names nobody was going to put in a report. Maya Voss understood that work. She was good at it. She had been underestimated inside it and pushed to the edge of it and brought back from that edge by the force of her own refusal to be only what the room expected her to be. That refusal was not a special quality. It was not unique to her. It lived in every person who had ever been told to stay in their lane and had looked at the lane and looked at what was needed and had chosen what was needed. The world was full of people like that, quiet, competent, passed over, doing more than anyone around them recognized. The recognition, when it came, was real. But it was never the reason they showed up. She had shown up because she could help. Because walking away from what she could do, what she was made to do, whether she had chosen it or it had been built into her by years of training and experience and the particular pressure of high-stakes situations, was its own kind of waste. And she had seen enough waste to know she was done contributing to it. The monitor at the station beeped once. A patient in Bay 2, nothing urgent, vitals fluctuating slightly above the alert threshold. She checked the reading, determined it was positional, noted it. She kept working. The city outside the window was quiet, and the ER below her was not. And Maya Voss, who had been Maya Reyes and had been other things besides, sat at the center of it and did what she had always done, what she would always do, what no amount of dismissal or distance or deliberately built silence had ever actually managed to stop her from doing. She paid attention. She showed up. That had always been enough to change everything.